What is going on, guys? The time has come. Today I want to share my thoughts and feelings on all things CrossFit. I've alluded to a couple of things in previous videos anyway, guys. Fair amount of praise, I will say, but also I'd be lying if I said there wasn't a few sneaky little passive-aggressive comments in there as well. Today I want to discuss the community, the people that I know are die-hard loyalists, the training methodology itself, their interpretation of functional fitness, chuck it all in a pot and see what we're left with. So put your goggles on, team, and let the deep dive begin. How's it going, guys? Welcome back to the channel. If you are new here, my name is Jim Galvin, and on this channel we cover all things training, nutrition, biohacking, and ancestral living to help you guys work out what you need to do based on your individual biology to help improve your performance, your health, and your physique. Okay, so let's start with one of the linchpins of CrossFit and something that they are at the grassroots of things known for: the community. And the ability of different gyms or boxes to welcome people in and make them feel as though they are part of something, and start helping them train in a way that allows them to keep training for a longer period of time, much longer than they would do if they were trying to improve their fitness, health and wellness on their own. When it comes to this principle, which is CrossFit's ability to basically try, build and form that community, I think few people can objectively argue that CrossFit is probably the best institution in the world for this right now. I don't know of any other global fitness brand that has the same kind of sense of togetherness that CrossFit has built unbelievably effectively over the last kind of 10, 15 years. That's both within the box that people train in individually and kind of the broader community. You don't see many anytime fitness loyalists high-fiving each other in the street. It lays down this kind of anchor for which people can globally connect. If you're a CrossFitter and you go on holiday, the chances are you're not going to be rocking up to a David Lloyd the next day. You're going to look for a local CrossFit box, and that's a way to kind of connect on this common ground and creates this level of, again, togetherness and kind of resonance, which again, I don't really see anyone else or any other kind of part of the fitness industry globally do this in any way that is anywhere near as close to CrossFit. So now, let's have a look at why it might be so popular and such a draw for people who love training. My theory is this: if you're a 100-meter sprinter, as a random example, there are a lot of things that you can do to try and kind of improve your performance in this field. But to a point, the way in which you can kind of assess your progression is pretty linear, right? Are you running any quicker? There's only one way to kind of test or showcase to other people or showcase to yourself that you have in fact got better. Most of us are naturally novelty seekers to a point, right? And CrossFit has so many opportunities to PB, so many new things to set a new PB or benchmark in, so many new things to try and show progress in. There's no other sport in the world where this is the case. And they do it with kit and equipment that pretty much every gym in the world has, because the sport is essentially gym-based. Clever little bastards, aren't they? They've basically, this is my opinion, through the use of different WODs and different accessible strength lifts, kind of created this universal language of fitness. And regardless of your own subjective thoughts and feelings or your own opinion on CrossFit, you've got to kind of recognize that that's very impressive, and overall you've just got to give them credit for that. Now, considering CrossFit claims to be all things fitness, and in theory CrossFit encompasses everything, it would be remiss of me not to look at whether the brand as a whole, and at least for me, and all I can speak to is the people that I know in it, are open to new information, new science, new data, new research on topics like strength development, on aerobic conditioning, recovery, hypertrophy, and basically by their own volition, all things performance, fitness, and all the components that are kind of associated with that. Now, before I get cancelled by the box police, I will once again concede to the fact that all I'm doing is sharing my opinion and speaking to and speaking of my experience going into a number of different CrossFit boxes in the UK and around the world, and connecting with people who do CrossFit both as members, as coaches, and as box owners. I think I know a fair few people in the CrossFit industry, but of course that is a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of 1%. I do know that. But in my experience, they are quite closed to the idea of other perspectives or approaches or methodologies. And some have been quite closed generally to the idea that different perspectives, approaches, and methodologies might in some way add value to what these coaches are currently doing. It might be different at a competitive level with some of the top, basically some of the pro athletes being a little bit more open to this kind of stuff. It would make sense that they would be, right? But at the grassroots, at kind of the recreational gym box level, it is interesting to me that I have genuinely have experienced this level of kind of closeness is the only word for it really, where there's a level of preachiness or sanctimony from some people. The people generally, are they welcoming to new people who want to come along and try CrossFit? Absolutely. Again, their ability to kind of make people feel welcome and form that community is genuinely second to none globally. Do I believe that they're open to new ideas that might contravene their current scripture? No. Fringe things like different biohacks, like breath work, sauna therapy, bone broth or whatever, sure, they're open to this stuff. They're open to kind of recovery aids as such. But I believe that if somebody approached a CrossFit coach and said, there's research here that suggests that one of the things that is in your CrossFit level 1 could benefit from being changed or tweaked or amended. Of all the people that work and coach and own in the CrossFit industry that I know, I personally believe and I predict that some of them would get quite defensive. Which is very interesting and ironic to me, looking at it kind of through the lens of science, because CrossFit is, again, by their own volition, covering everything, is extremely broad, but very narrow. And it might not necessarily be them, it might be me, because I can be a little bit of a dickhead and I can go in there and stir the pot. And if I go up to someone who owns a certain gym and I'm talking about the fact like, well, you say this is a sprint workout because it lasts less than 7 minutes. If half the people in here can run a mile in less than that time, do we think it's okay to call it a sprint? So I get the fact that some of these people probably think I'm a bit of a knobber. That is obviously very tongue-in-cheek. I don't actually communicate it in quite as much of a passive-aggressive way as that. I hope it doesn't come across that way anyway, it probably does. But I have in the past shared, and I still do kind of maintain, a slight confusion about CrossFit and the general functional fitness industry in the UK and their interpretation of the word speed or power. That's a conversation for another time, but let me get back to this and I want to share an example with you. Let's say there's someone that is a speed mechanics expert and they are an absolute pro in this and they have been focusing on just speed and speed mechanics for 20 years. And they say with their sports science background that CrossFitters generally could benefit only doing Metcon 3 days a week and spending the second half of the session on the other days they train working on purely sprint mechanics. And even more randomly, everyone who's over 5'11" should train in a certain way, and everyone who's under 5'11" should train in a different way. Obviously, it depends on the prestige, right? So if someone was a flipping professor, people would probably heed his advice or her advice a little bit more. However, it is mental to me that if this was someone who couldn't back up that statement and that assertion with an unbelievable amount of qualifications, might rebuke the credibility of the information from this absolute pro. But linking this kind of stuff to the people side of it, to kind of the community side of it that we were just talking about, I do kind of understand it. I'm not saying that I agree with this die-hard, almost kind of like religious attachment to this scripture, because I don't know how often the CrossFit scripture kind of gets, do they have a team of people that are constantly looking at new research and constantly changing the courses? I have no idea. And again, I'm not really speaking about the organization kind of right at the top. I'm talking about members and coaches and box owners that I know. So again, I don't necessarily agree with it, but I do kind of understand. So even in Atlas, in my brand, we always talk about attempting to make the transition, right, to cross the bridge between having people think that the stuff that they do with you is something I go to and transitioning into something I'm part of. And when you have the members, the coaches and the box owners have that narrative in their mind, again, I don't necessarily agree with it, but you can kind of understand why they do start to become defensive when you start to possibly question their scripture. But in the world of science and sport, I believe that challenging and questioning is the most unbelievably productive thing you can do. And that's what I see personally lacking in the intellectual approach of these coaches that I know. So let's talk about the general objective now. So CrossFit claim that their general objective is to develop all components of fitness at the same time. So to be able to continue to develop something along kind of the strength spectrum, so you've got strength here and then aerobic conditioning there and most of the other stuff in the middle, to kind of bring them all up together and not bring one or focus on one so much that it starts to have detrimental effects on the other one. Makes sense, right? At a very kind of high level view, that's pretty much the same objective as me. And if we look at the general, again, I know I'm using the word general a lot and you'll understand why in a minute, but if we look at the general approach to achieving that objective, it's good. It attempts to keep a balance between their three main components. You've got kind of weightlifting or strength training. You've got what they call gymnastics, so their body weight stuff, which is obviously a lot of kind of like lactic tolerance and stuff as well. And then you've got aerobic conditioning, like their Metcon, their metabolic conditioning stuff, which is like their cardio. My subjective opinion, it is a little bit too cardio heavy for me. And again, I don't really agree with their interpretation of the word speed and power. For me, power is something that is like absolute maximal output for I don't know, anything up to about 15 seconds max, really, not 5 minutes. And I might be biased with that, right? Because my background is sprinting and jumping and bobsleigh. But overall, I don't see that much maximal power output stuff other than a couple of different barbell exercise, mainly Olympic lifting variations, feature too much in the competitive CrossFit world that I've seen anyway. But here's my 2 cents on why the balance might not exactly be in the middle. Number one, and the most challenging for the people who do CrossFit, I do believe that people to a certain degree have made a positive association between progress or kind of the effectiveness of your training and the amount of pain and suffering on the process. I know people who have literally said, one of the reasons I struggle with strength training on its own in a session, I feel as though if I'm not out of breath and sweating, I don't feel as though I've worked. Which I kind of get, and that's a very subjective and kind of self-reported preference, and everyone is absolutely entitled to their own preference, right? But if you truly look within and you think that you might have developed a quite kind of like a direct correlation, like a proportionate correlation between I need to feel ball bagged by the end of it to that's how I know that I've worked hard and progressed, and otherwise it's a wasted session, I haven't worked hard enough. If you do have that, that's fine if that's your preference, but you can understand, right, why that might lead you to a slightly more cardio heavy performance standard. Number two, very linearly, and this might be linked, I'm not too sure, most competitions are pretty cardio heavy. So if you want to compete in anything at any level, from like elite, intermediate, beginner, novice, whatever kind of the categories are within the industry, you're gonna have to get your Metcon game up a lot because the vast majority of events are more than 15 seconds. And number three, we all to a certain degree buy into the hardcore and intense association kind of with the CrossFit brand. And if there's gonna be a speed event in a competition with anywhere from 12 people to 100,000 people watching, something like acid bath, which from memory is 500 meters on a ski, 500 meters on a row, and then 1,000 meters on a bike erg. The fact that there has to be an event that correlates to all different components of fitness, and that's the speed one. That is, for a spectator, that's gonna be a lot sexier and more enjoyable to watch than a 7-second burst on an assault bike, which I completely understand, even me saying I don't think power output stuff is particularly well represented at the games and other kind of competitions that I've seen, other than Olympic lifting stuff and maybe some squats and deadlifts or whatever. But overall power output stuff isn't well represented. I'm even saying that I would probably rather watch acid bath than just watch everyone do 7 seconds and then walk out of the flipping court. So those are 3 different reasons that I have observed that, again, just my prediction and why it might be a little bit cardio heavy. So now let's take things one step further and look at the exercise prescription itself. Now with this, it sounds like I'm kind of firmly white knuckling my way on top of the fence and refusing to make a decision. But on this particular subject, guys, call me Natalie Imbruglia, I'm torn. I love watching the more skillful stuff, but to a point I don't agree with the argument that they are good tests or assessments of this principle, such as speed or power. A snatch is amazing to watch, and it is when you are technically proficient enough and mobile enough and you've got years worth of exposure to snatching. It is, I suppose, a good test of power output. But if you compare it to something that's a lot more raw, a lot more linear, and a lot less skill and mobility based, something like a broad jump or a keg toss, comparing how effective they are at assessing power, it's not even a question. So now let's zoom out a little bit, look at everything in the macro and look at the general brand. I have to say, guys, I love it. I love watching it. I love watching the CrossFit Games. I think the CrossFit Games is probably now my favorite sporting event of the year to watch. I love, love, love going to different CrossFit boxes when I travel. And I do, to a point, buy into the culture a certain amount. I think the community is amazing. And I do think, and I have said this in certain videos in the past, that overall, when you kind of chuck everything into a pot, all of my particular thoughts, feelings, experiences, predictions, views, whatever, about CrossFit, mix it all up, I do think overall it is unbelievably net positive. But that being said, I do, and I know I'm gonna get unbelievable online flack for this, but to a point, I do believe it's a bit of an information bubble, it's a bit of an echo chamber. A sphere where some people, again, people that I've experienced and that I know, I'll own my own experience of it, wouldn't be incredibly welcoming of people asking them questions, of offering different perspectives, and of suggesting or advising something that goes against their current scripture. And I don't know whether that resistance is coming from the top down, as in the institutions like that, and then that funnels down to everyone that works for the brand, and then that funnels down to the boxes, or whether or not it's something at the bottom up where new members are so happy with what that particular process has given them in terms of physical result and emotional experience of being part of this tribe. So I don't know whether or not it's top down or bottom up. I've experienced a closeness to anything that contravenes what they say, and in the world of, and in any realm or in any paradigm of sports science, if you're not willing to look at other things to progress, it's a super dangerous way to be. One of my favorite quotes of all time is this: "The enemy of growth is certainty." I experience a benefit in my own life when I apply this anchoring mantra to my intellectual understanding of different things, my own belief system, my relationships, my business, and my training and my health. I have either a cold shower or an ice bath every single morning, absolute minimum 6 days a week. But if someone came up to me and was like, actually, there's loads of new research here, and all of these pros that know what they're talking about are saying that that actually might be really bad for you, then I'd be pretty gutted. But at the very least, I would look at it, because this stuff deserves attention, and I'm aware that our understanding of all things about the human body aren't exactly tip-top. This is why the scientific consensus about everything to do with our health and about training and ideal rep schemes and blah, 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 this is why they flip and change so often. And I don't want to change anyone's mind here. I just want to be able to go into a conversation and engage in some meaningful discourse, knowing that both myself and the person that I'm talking to, even though we might have opposing views or perspectives on certain things, we're both entering into that dialogue with open minds. And to prove my point on my statement about CrossFit possibly being a little bit of an echo chamber, I'm going to say this. If you feel intellectually or emotionally triggered by what I've just said and you don't agree with it, or you don't like me because of what I've said, go back to the start of this video and actually listen to every single point that I've made. And when you see that anywhere from 90 to 95% of what I've just said is a positive about CrossFit. So I came into this neutrally, right? The video started with me being like, I'm gonna share with you my thoughts about whether or not it's good or bad. When it's 90 to 95% good, but I say 5% of stuff that is basically me just saying, I wish people were more open-minded. If you are triggered by the fact that I've said that and you're a CrossFitter, you're kind of proving my point that it is a little bit too echo chambery for me. Overall, to sum up, not that I need to, unbelievably net positive, CrossFit does win. In terms of whether or not it's good or bad for the world, it ain't even close. It is incredible, my favorite sporting event of the year. I do buy into the culture. I don't class myself as a CrossFitter because it does feel like quite a, I don't know, kind of a concrete box, and I prefer to be a little bit more fitness agnostic. So sometimes I do CrossFit, like sometimes I go for a run, if you see what I mean. But I feel as though if I was to say I am a CrossFitter, I kind of limit myself from certain other things and certain other things I'm allowed to believe and stuff. My narrative, who knows? Guys, seriously, if you have any comments or any questions or any kind of comebacks on any of the stuff I've said, I do welcome it. Again, meaningful discourse. I do go into everything with an open mind. Strong opinions, loosely held. I'm absolutely willing to have my mind changed. And on all things fitness and health, I don't imagine that I will feel the same way in 4 years to how I do now. So by all means, just put anything down in the comments section below. Even if it's a little bit of a negative comeback or a question, I do welcome it, mainly because it really does help the algorithm. And until next time, you absolute legends, stay strong, stay healthy, stay awesome, and I'll see you soon.